The Farm, Part 5. I had to know what was in there. If my future lay anywhere near this farm, I had to know. I began to walk around the barn, looking for anything unusual, anything that might clue me into what was being held in there. Around one side, out of sight of the farmhouse, I noticed that the section of smashed boards had recently been replaced. It was a shoddy job, and I quickly stamped out my lit cigarette on the ground, taking out a small knife I kept on a keychain before I began to pry away the boards. With each one I loosened, the sounds from inside became louder and louder, and it was obvious what I was hearing. There were pigs in there, but the noises they were making was nothing like I'd never heard before. Once I'd cleared a large enough hole, I got down on my hands and knees and began to crawl through the gap into the dark interior of the farm. I slapped at my hands and arms, feeling things crawling all over them before I managed to find my feet. I could feel the cobwebs clinging to my hair before I dusted them off, fishing in my pocket again for the phone so I could bring up the flashlight app. As I turned it on and the bright, white light shone into the interior of the barn, what I saw first was so inexplicable, alien to me. At first I had trouble processing what it was. There was a large table set out in front of me, and on it lay a broken, butchered animal cadaver. Only there was something horrifyingly familiar about the shape of the thing. How its legs seemed to be a little too long, how its face seemed to be a little too fat. Then it hit me. It was the same thing I'd seen in the cornfield that day, the same thing that had been looking back at me with squinty, obsidian black eyes. But it couldn't have been. This thing was much larger, at least 5 feet from the stem to the stern, while the thing in the cornfield couldn't have been any taller than a few feet at best. I approached the table slowly, shedding the phone's light over the thing as fat, black flies buzzed idly as they feasted on the remains. Whatever it was had been surrounded by melted, burned-out candles, with strange, black carvings cut into the wood surrounding its form. The cadaver had clearly defined porcine features, a snout, trotters, and thick, black hair all over its body. But its genitals, its lack of hair, and its grotesquely fingered hands were clearly more human than anything else. But my mouth dropped open when I saw what was at its center. Its belly had been torn open, the flesh bearing the rough marks of being ripped, not cut, as if with some sharpened, bladed implement. And inside, something gore-soaked glimmered under the bright light of my phone. Silver coins. Its insides were stuffed with silver coins that seemed to overflow from its burst entrails. But I barely had time to reflect on what I was seeing before a squeal from one corner of the barn demanded my attention. I turned, shining my phone's light in that direction, recoiling in horror at what I saw. In a large, elongated stall, several of the same piggish creatures kneeled in a bed of dry hay. They were lined up side by side, jostling for position as they suckled and snuffed at the belly of something considerably and grotesquely larger. It was their mother, a huge, bulbous, pig-like creature with flesh as black as coal dust laid on its side in the hay. But again, it was like no animal I'd ever seen before. Its legs were more like that of a spider, sectioned and bony thin, which kicked lazily every so often as its young suckled away. But its eyes, my God, its eyes. They were many, far, far too many. Larger and smaller beads of obsidian flesh that grew from its molted black ears and extended down its snout. However, it must have been blind, as it didn't react at all as I shone the torch all over its body. Its young didn't react either. Through ignorance or obliviousness to their frenzy feeding, I wasn't sure. But it occurred to me that they may not have been reacting to me because they were already used to the presence of people. These were things that should not be, things that had no right to exist by any natural law, and with that thought in my mind, I just reacted. I took the lighter from my pocket and began to spark it, touching the naked flame to as much of the dry, spindled hay as I could manage. Sparks could be heard all around me by the time the interior of the barn became illuminated by the bright orange glow, smoke billowing up into the rafters as I ran back into the hole I paneled and crawled across into the night. I could hear the muffled squealing grow into painful screeching as I ran towards my car, not daring to collect any of the items I left in the guest bedroom. The sounds coming from the barn were the stuff of nightmares as I climbed into the driver's side, hearing the chorus of wounded shrieks joined by the hammering on the inside of the barn door. The things were trying to break out, trying to escape the flames, yet being roasted in the process. At first, as I slid the key into the ignition, the engine refused to start, and as the figures of the family began to appear on the porch, it occurred to me in one horrible moment of realization that they may have sabotaged my car. I twisted the key over and over again, watching as Sophie's father and brother ran at the barn with pails of water, throwing them uselessly onto the flames before watching the entire structure was engulfed into a fiery conflagration. Finally, as my engine started up, they turned and began to give chase. I expected them to catch me at any moment, but I watched in my rearview mirror as it began to slow, seeming like they were weakening with each passing second. I remember Sophie's father in particular, falling into the dirt as his knees seemed to give out completely, a streak of white hair where his natural brown should have been. He was changing. Each of them were. Wilting like unwatered flowers before collapsing to the ground. They were aging and dying before my very eyes. And the last time I ever laid eyes on my beloved Sophie, as she crawled along the earth in pursuit of me, she looked 100 years old. I drove all night, foot on the gas until a sliver of blue appeared on the eastern horizon, and my fuel gauge ticked dangerously low. And after I pulled into a gas station on the outskirts of Detroit, I got out of my car and almost collapsed against the hood after bursting into tears. Only one other traveler was present, an older man who just pretended he didn't see me before heading into the gas station store to pay up. I kept seeing Sophie's face in my mind, the way she used to smile at me when we first met. I couldn't reconcile how she looked in the end, withered, ancient, angry. The entirety of the past few days seemed like a blur, like the whole thing had been one long bad dream. I was exhausted, weak from near starvation, but my appetite was evidently in no rush to return. Somehow, I managed to pull myself together, stepping off of the forecourt and smoking another cigarette away from the gas pumps to curb my nerves. Then I walked back over to my car, pumped a fresh tank of gas into her, and then followed the path of the older driver into the gas station to pay my bill. I just felt numb. Maybe I shouldn't have been relieved that the nightmare was over, that I had somehow escaped this sort of hellish place within my life. But it was little consolation. I'd lost the love of my life, even though it did turn out that she was never really who I thought she was. The clerk behind the counter was some punk chick. Tired green eyes looked up at me from underneath a shock of purple hair as she nursed the black coffee. Therese, her name badge said. I had to clear my throat to make myself heard as I slid a 20 across the countertop. I'm number 4. She got off her stool and began to tender my money when I saw she had a small TV box with her, one that showed an oddly familiar landscape. Hey, I said. Turn that up for a second. The clerk shot me a displeased look, but obliged me all the same. The TV showed a newscast, images from a helicopter that circled something that was surrounding an endless cornfield. What is without a doubt a geological phenomenon of almost unprecedented scale here in the United States, the voice from the speaker cackled. As you can see, Mark, the newly formed sinkhole is hundreds of feet wide. We're talking whole football fields here, and no one is quite sure how deep it goes. Crazy, huh? The clerk said. Happened just a few hours ago. Hope no one got hurt. No, I replied dully. No one did. Oh yeah? And how would you know? But I was already walking out of the door, getting ready for the long remainder of the drive back home, where I had no doubt I would spend the rest of my life trying to forget the things I saw and the things I heard back on that terrible place that pretended to be a farm. End of story. Thank you for watching my channel, She's Just Trying. That was the last part of the farm series. If you like what you saw and like what you heard, make sure to hit the like and the subscribe button. I'll be reading more stories like this, but make sure to check out the author because this story was really fun to read. Anyways, my Patreon and my Ko-fi is in the description, so if you'd like to support me in any way while I'm not monetized, I would really appreciate it. I'm also on Twitter, and I'll reply to any tweets you at me in. So anyways, stay safe, and bye!